Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Meet the Media. I'm Eusebius McKaiser. If you are a news junkie, which most of us as South Africans are, then of course it's been an exhilarating week as far as news cycles go. But if you are a media professional, it's an exhilaration that comes with a challenge. How do you keep up with a story that is constantly changing? What do you prioritize when the news cycle has been on steroids? And how do you decide what to anticipate in terms of where the story goes next? That is what we're going to be exploring a little bit later. But as always, we first have a look at the front pages of the Sunday newspapers and what has been going on over the past week or so. Joining me today to do exactly that is Stephen Grootes, who of course is presenter of the Midday Report on 702 and also senior political reporter for Eyewitness News. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us again on the show. It's a great pleasure having you.
Good morning, Eusebius. Thanks.
The news cycle has been on steroids. How difficult is it to keep up with everything? And I know that you are a nerd. I know how you pace up and down in the studio when you take over from me at 702. It's really, really hectic. It's exciting, but also hectic, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there's so many different dynamics playing out. And in a way, you know, one of the things that you've got to be aware of is so many stories fall below the radar. So you've got the sea of red in Tshwane with all of the EFF supporters. There was a DA protest that I think no one really focused on. Then you've got just down the road, sort of organised capital, if I can call it that.
Apparently the president went to Zim.
Yes. But I mean, in a way, and then of course you've all got the state capture report and Brian Molefe crying on Thursday and then going to a briefing and leaving on Friday. But the biggest story of the week, possibly when we look back in a year's time, may well be Nahawu and its decision to say President Jacob Zuma must resign. I mean, they didn't withdraw their support. They said he must resign. And that, I mean, if that's the start of something, COSATU's biggest union now,
absolutely,
you know, that's the story.
Well, let's see how the Sunday papers called it. We'll have a look firstly at the Sunday Times. And I mean, it's quite interesting, of course, if you have a look there. Hawks gun for Jonas, Zweli and Gwede as Zuma Dixon police unit opens line of attack on Gupta whistleblowers. I don't know whether to laugh or not when I read this, Stephen Grootes, because this is obviously selectively using the Public Protector's report to try now and go after folks who are perceived, this is my interpretation anyway, of being anti-Zuma by saying, hey, by the way, if you had known about all these shenanigans, didn't you have a legal duty to report the fact that the Guptas are up to something? What did you make of the Sunday Times lead?
You know, it's incredible on one level if it's true, and I mean, with what's happening in the Hawks at the moment, I think it may well be the case. And the Sunday Times is really on a good streak at the moment.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to diss their story, but if it's true, what you're seeing is the Hawks will really go after Gwede Mantashe and Zweli Mkhize, but they'll leave President Jacob Zuma alone, who must also have known. I mean, it can't be both ways.
Or the Gupta family.
Or the Guptas. And I think the other thing that's happened is that the Hawks have lost their sting. No one cares anymore. You go and lay charges against Pravin Gordhan and then you have them withdrawn. That also happened this week, by the way. Then I think you've lost your sting and no one cares, which is why I'm also interested in the City Press lead that Pravin Gordhan could be charged.
Well, let's have a look at that, actually, see whether we can a nice look there. The front page is also here in front of you and me, Stephen. And it says, Pravin to be charged again. For those who haven't yet had their coffee and looked at the papers, just give them a basic précis of what the City Press story is, and then we'll chat about it.
This is an Abra Mashego story, and he really has been excellent on the NPA for a number of years. I'm frustrated to say how good he is. And what he sort of explains is how it seems that the rogue unit, inverted commas, the biggest inverted commas you've ever seen, by the way, around that now. And what you're seeing is the idea that he could still be charged and that people in the Hawks are still investigating and they'll go to the NPA and that there are 4 prosecutors on this case. But again, I don't think that if Pravin Gordhan were to be charged again, firstly, I think the ANC would be furious. If you look at the ANC statement this week from Gwede Mantashe, effectively he was saying, and he said it on 702, that the NPA must stay out of ANC factional politics. I thought that was a very strong statement. I think he was saying, don't you dare. The second thing is that once you have laid charges against Pravin Gordhan and then withdrawn them in the most humiliating of circumstances, if you charge him again, you're just going to be laughed at. You'll be
but
laughed
also
at
Shaun Abrams' integrity is now in shreds, right? I mean, the guy's been found wanting in terms of his own judgment call, getting the law wrong, being called out by legal experts. And already we have legal opinion in the public space that said that Pravin did nothing wrong, that this so-called rogue unit, in fact, that there are discretionary powers that enable you to investigate if you are in SARS. So if he doesn't have all his legal ducks in a row, surely he will be toast. I mean, he's already toast in some people's opinion.
Absolutely, although we mustn't forget the Muzisa Kekane report, which was the first investigation into the SARS unit by SARS itself. In fact, the decision to investigate, to start that process, was signed by Ivan Pillay, of all people. And it seemed to find that this unit should not have existed. That said, I don't think there will be a strong legal case against Pravin Gordhan. And we shouldn't argue the law. I mean, this is the other problem about being a political reporter at the moment. We get caught into the law, and in a way we should. But the story is actually a political one.
Absolutely.
And that's really the interesting story.
Let's finally look at the Sunday Independent. And I must say, all of this, it's such a pleasure to not have to criticize our front page leads this morning. The Sunday Independent has got an excellent one. Matole breaks ranks. And I mean, this is extraordinary because Matole Motshekga basically saying a couple of things that are important here. JZ must resign. Collective responsibility, which is the ANC mantra, should be chucked out the window. And disagreeing with Gwede by saying that it shouldn't be left up to number one's conscience.
This is strong stuff. I mean, Matole Motshekga has given us an indication of how strong he is. He's one of the most educated men in the country. I mean, he really is an incredible intellectual figure. And I think he's really been reduced by Zuma. If you look at his behavior over in Kandla, I mean, I think he must look at himself in the mirror and think, how did this happen? You know, I mean, obviously we don't know what is happening. The other thing that is interesting is, like Jackson Mthembu, he's protected. He's protected by the members of the ANC because last week we had that internal report that was on the front page of Business Day, which shows you, if you look through it, it shows you how frustrated and angry branches are. In fact, Eusebius, I'd go far as to say, if you took the provincial leaders and the NEC out of it, you would have an ANC almost united in its opposition to Zuma.
Absolutely.
And that tells you the corrosive influence, in a way, of those figures, provincial leaders and the NEC.
Stephen, lovely having you on the show. We're going to have Stephen back a little bit later as we ask, how do you anticipate where the story will be going? And of course, you can take part in this conversation on Twitter. Just use the hashtag #MeetTheMedia. Please do stay with us.